Right now, somewhere, someone is reading a message from a person they love, and they're feeling that familiar weight in their chest, that heaviness that says, maybe I'm not enough, maybe I'm asking for too much, maybe I should just accept this. Here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. You are currently being taught to undervalue yourself, and you don't even realize it's happening. Not by schools, not by society directly, but by the people closest to you, by patterns so normalized, so disguised as love and loyalty, that questioning them feels like betrayal. And the worst part? You've probably been trained your entire life to feel guilty for having standards. But here's the thing, and I want you to really sit with this: your worth is not negotiable. It is not something to be earned through suffering. It is not something that disappears when someone decides they don't want to acknowledge it. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how emotional exploitation works, why intelligent, good people fall for it, and most importantly, you'll have the tools to recognize it the moment it starts. And I'm going to be direct. If you skip any part of this, it's like taking half a dose of medicine when you're really sick. The pieces connect, the logic builds. So if you're in a rush, watch at 2 times speed, but don't skip. Because somewhere in these next minutes is the exact realization you've been waiting for. Let's begin. Emotional exploitation is not what you think it is. You've probably been told that exploitation looks obvious. Manipulation, control, abuse. And yes, those things exist, but they're not the full picture. The most effective emotional exploitation is so subtle that the person experiencing it often becomes its most passionate defender. They say things like, "You don't understand. They love me. You don't know the whole story. They're just stressed right now." And they might be right. The exploiter might genuinely love them, but love and exploitation are not mutually exclusive. This is the psychological trap that keeps millions of people stuck. Emotional exploitation thrives in the space between love and respect. It whispers, "Because I love you, you should accept my behavior." It promises, "If you really cared about me, you'd prioritize my needs over your own." It demands, "Loyalty means never questioning me." Think about that word, loyalty. We've been taught to see it as the highest virtue. To be loyal is to be good. To question loyalty is to be selfish. And so we stay in relationships that drain us, with family members who diminish us, in friendships that are actually one-sided negotiations where we're always the one compromising. Here's the psychological truth that nobody talks about. A person who truly loves you will never ask you to diminish yourself to keep them comfortable. The research is clear. Psychologists from Johns Hopkins to Harvard have documented something called emotional dependency loops. These are patterns where one person becomes the emotional regulator for another, where your mood, your choices, your entire internal world becomes organized around keeping someone else stable. And the person creating this pattern often doesn't even realize they're doing it. They might genuinely believe they're the victim. They might genuinely believe they're just sensitive or needy or struggling. But intention doesn't change impact. If you're spending your emotional energy managing someone else's feelings while your own are ignored, that's exploitation. If you're constantly explaining your boundaries only to have them crossed, that's exploitation. If you feel guilty for having needs, that's exploitation. And here's where it gets interesting. The people most susceptible to this are not the weak. They're not the stupid. They're the sensitive ones, the empathetic ones, the ones with a deep capacity for compassion, the ones who were taught that sacrifice equals love. If this resonates, you know exactly who I'm talking about. That person in your life who seems to always put themselves last, who apologizes even when they haven't done anything wrong, who stays in situations long past the expiration date. And maybe that person is you. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was 34 years old when she finally walked away from her mother. For 34 years, she had been the emotional caretaker of a woman who experienced anxiety that was very real, very devastating, and entirely Sarah's responsibility to manage. Sarah's childhood was structured around her mother's moods. Good grades mattered less than knowing whether mom was having a good day or bad day. Friend time had to be cancelled on a moment's notice because Mom was struggling. Sarah learned early that her job was to be the stable one, the reliable one, the one who understood. By her 20s, Sarah had internalized the belief that her worth was directly tied to her usefulness to others. She became a therapist, which makes sense for someone trained to prioritize everyone else's emotional world. She had relationships where she was the supporter, the fixer, the one who cared more, and in every single situation she felt guilty for having boundaries, guilty for being tired, guilty for wanting reciprocal love. The pattern was so normalized that Sarah didn't even recognize it as a pattern. She thought she was just a good person, a caring person. She thought the exhaustion was just the cost of love. Then one day something shifted. Her mother called her crying about something Sarah's sister had done, and Sarah did something she'd never done before. She didn't immediately promise to fix it. She didn't rearrange her entire day. She said, "Mom, I'm sorry you're struggling, but I can't fix this for you." And her mother's response was visceral. "After everything I've done for you, after I sacrificed my entire life, and this is how you repay me." That's when it clicked for Sarah. The implicit contract, the debt that could never be repaid, the love that came with conditions and expectations, and the constant message that her needs were secondary, almost insulting to voice. It took Sarah 3 years of therapy to understand something profound. Her mother's pain was real, but her mother's pain was not Sarah's responsibility, and her mother's inability to accept that boundary didn't mean Sarah was wrong to create it. Today, Sarah has a different relationship with her mother. It's smaller, less intense, less emotionally enmeshed, and her mother experiences that as rejection. She tells people that Sarah abandoned her. She says Sarah became selfish, but Sarah's anxiety is gone. Her relationships are reciprocal. She sleeps better. She doesn't apologize reflexively. She doesn't feel guilty for existing. And if you're watching this and something in Sarah's story feels like your story, I want you to know what feels like selfishness. That's actually self-respect. What feels like betrayal. That's actually freedom. Let's get into the neurobiology for a moment, because understanding how this works in your brain is crucial. When you're emotionally exploited, particularly by someone you love, your brain goes into what researchers call a trauma bonding state. You might have heard this term in the context of cult indoctrination or hostage situations, and you'd be right to make that connection. The same neural mechanisms are at play. Here's how it works. Periods of emotional intensity, both positive and negative, combined with intermittent reinforcement, create a powerful chemical loop in your brain. Your nervous system becomes dysregulated. You're constantly in a low state of alert, trying to predict the next emotional storm. And then when things are good, when the person is kind to you, when they acknowledge you, your brain floods with dopamine and oxytocin. You feel relief. You feel connected. You interpret this as love. But it's not love. It's entrapment wearing love's costume. The neuroscientist Bessel van der Kolk has documented extensively how prolonged emotional stress literally changes the structure of your hippocampus and amygdala, the parts of your brain responsible for memory, fear processing, and emotional regulation. Over time, if you're in a pattern of emotional exploitation, you lose the ability to clearly see what's happening. Your reality becomes fragmented. You start to believe the contradictions. They hurt me because they love me. I'm overreacting. This is normal. And here's something almost no one talks about. This is not weakness. Your empathy is not a flaw. The fact that you keep trying to make it work, that you keep hoping things will change, that you keep finding excuses for the person exploiting you, that's not stupidity. That's what happens when your nervous system has been conditioned over time. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. For humans living in tribes, the ability to read others' emotions and adjust your behavior to maintain connection was essential. It meant survival. The people with the most developed emotional sensitivity, the most willingness to sacrifice individual needs for group cohesion, those people thrived. They were the connectors, the healers, the ones who held communities together. but we're not living in small tribes anymore. And the same neural programming that once protected you is now being weaponized against you. The philosopher Aristotle talked about something called the doctrine of the mean, the idea that virtue lies between two extremes. For compassion, the mean lies between cruelty and self-abandonment. But, we've been culturally programmed to believe that the closer you move toward self-abandonment in the name of love, the more virtuous you become. We celebrate the martyr. We romanticize the person who gives everything. And unfortunately, we shame the person who says no. And people who exploit emotionally know this. They know that they can appeal to your goodness. They know they can invoke guilt. They know they can reframe their harmful behavior as a cry for help and your healthy boundary as abandonment. Eastern philosophy, particularly Stoicism and Buddhism, offers something different. The Stoics taught that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can control our response. Our responsibility is to ourselves first, not in a selfish way, but in the way you must put your oxygen mask on before helping others on an airplane. The Buddha taught about the concept of wise action, which requires three things: intention, consequence, and truth. If your action is rooted in truth and its consequence is that you maintain your integrity and well-being, then even if it causes someone else temporary pain, it's wise, because anything else would be perpetuating an illusion. Here's the philosophy that changes everything. You cannot love someone into not exploiting you. You cannot earn your way out of exploitation. You can only leave it. I want to show you the difference between these two scenarios, because honestly, clarity is everything. Scenario A, a person you love who respects you. Your boundary triggers sadness, disappointment, or even fear, but they respect it. They might say, "I'm sad to hear that, and I understand. I'll work on this." They might struggle, they might need time, but they move toward the boundary rather than away from it. They recognize that your well-being matters. They might even thank you for your honesty. When you're struggling, they're present, but they don't make your struggle about them. They support you, but they don't require you to be responsible for their emotional stability. Reciprocity exists. Sometimes you give more, sometimes they give more, but across time there's a general balance. You don't feel guilty for being honest. You don't feel like you have to shrink to fit into their life. You don't second guess whether you're being too much. Your boundary is met with a response designed to make you feel guilty, afraid, or obligated. It might be tears, it might be anger, it might be a calm explanation of why your boundary is actually just you being selfish or abandoning them. They reframe your needs as threats. If you loved me, you wouldn't need space. I guess I just don't matter to you. I can't believe you'd abandon me when I need you most. When they're struggling, it becomes your job to fix it. And when you do, there's no lasting relief, just a temporary pause before the next crisis. Because honestly, they don't have the internal tools to manage their emotions, so you become their primary coping mechanism. Reciprocity doesn't exist. It's a constant flow in one direction, their needs, their feelings, their timeline. And if you try to bring your own needs to the table, you're met with, "I thought you were different. You're just like everyone else. You don't really love me." Here's what's crucial to understand. Both people might genuinely believe they're the victim. The person exploiting might genuinely feel abandoned by your boundary. They might experience their need for your emotional labor as legitimate. They might not be consciously manipulative, but consciousness doesn't change the impact. And your job is not to manage their consciousness or their feelings. Your job is to manage your own life and your own integrity. And here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes the same person can be both. You can genuinely love someone and be getting exploited by them simultaneously. Those things don't cancel each other out. Love doesn't give anyone the right to diminish you. Love doesn't come with unlimited access to your emotional labor. Love has boundaries, or it's not love, it's ownership. All right. So you've recognized the pattern. Maybe it's with a family member, maybe it's a romantic partner, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's all of the above. What now? Here are the concrete steps that actually work. Step 1, name it without judgment. Before you do anything, you need to get clear on what's actually happening. Not in a way that condemns the other person, but in a way that clarifies reality. Write it down if you need to. Use specific examples. Not, they're mean to me, but when I set a boundary about spending holidays differently, they respond with silence and coldness for weeks. The act of specificity breaks the spell. Vagueness keeps exploitation alive. Vagueness lets you rationalize, but specificity is harder to argue with, even in your own mind. Step 2, identify your part, not your fault, but your responsibility. Here's the distinction. It's not your fault that someone exploited you. It is your responsibility to stop accepting it. You didn't cause their behavior, but you did accept it. Probably because you were taught that acceptance is love, that tolerance is loyalty. Ask yourself, what need was I trying to meet by staying? What belief about myself made me think this was acceptable? What message did I receive as a child about my value? This isn't about blame, it's about power. Because the moment you own your part, you get your power back. You recognize that you're not a victim of circumstances. You're someone who made a choice based on limited information, and now you have more information. Step 3, start small with micro boundaries. You don't have to blow up your entire life tomorrow. Start small. If someone always calls you in crisis and you always drop everything, start by saying, I can't talk right now, but I can call you back in an hour. If someone constantly complains and you always listen for hours, say, I care about you and I've realized I need to protect my own energy. If someone guilt trips you, practice this phrase, I hear that you're upset. That doesn't change my decision. The point is not to hurt them. The point is to get practice tolerating their discomfort while maintaining your boundary. Because here's what happens. They will be uncomfortable. They will be unhappy. They might act like you're the worst person alive, and you'll have to sit with that. That's the part they were relying on you not doing. Step 4, prepare for the extinction burst. In psychology, there's a concept called an extinction burst. When you remove reinforcement from a behavior, that behavior initially intensifies before it decreases. If someone has been getting emotional responses from you, fear, guilt, compliance, attention, and you suddenly stop giving them, they will turn up the intensity. They might become more needy, more dramatic, more accusatory, more loving in an intense, desperate way. They might promise to change. They might threaten to leave. They might tell other people, you're the problem. This is not a sign that your boundary is wrong. This is a sign that it's working. This is what it looks like when someone realizes they've lost their grip on you. You have to not fall for the extinction burst. You have to stay steady. You have to remember that their emotional escalation is not your responsibility to manage. Step 5, grieve what this means. Setting boundaries with someone means accepting that the relationship you thought you had was, at least partly, an illusion. And that's genuinely sad. So, allow yourself to feel that sadness, because if you skip this step, you'll feel pulled back in by nostalgia or guilt. Understand this, you're not losing a good thing. You're ending an arrangement that was harmful to both of you. Harmful to them because it prevented them from developing their own emotional capacity, and harmful to you because it consumed your resources. Step 6, build your worth independent of their validation. This is, honestly, the real work. Because you've been taught your worth is relative. Relative to your usefulness, your sacrifice, your emotional labor. But now you have to learn that your worth is intrinsic. Try writing down 5 things that are true about you regardless of what anyone else thinks. Not achievements, not accomplishments, just things like, I'm a person who tries, I have integrity, I feel deeply, I learn and grow, I take responsibility for my choices. Your worth is not given to you by other people. It's recognized or denied, but it doesn't actually change. This is why the people who exploit you need you to forget this. Because the moment you truly know your own worth, you're immune to exploitation. Here's what I want you to understand as we wrap this up, and I'm saying this directly to you: the guilt you feel when you prioritize yourself. That's not the voice of truth. That's the voice of conditioning. That's the internalized voice of someone who benefited from your self-abandonment. The fear that comes up when you imagine setting a boundary, that's not warning you of danger. That's showing you where you've been trained to make yourself small. The feeling that you're being selfish, that's actually clarity. That's you beginning to understand your own value. And I'm going to say something that might feel radical. Your peace matters more than their comfort. Your mental health matters more than their approval. Your life matters more than their need for you to be their emotional life support. Not because they're bad people, not because love is temporary, but because true love, real, genuine love, wants the other person to be whole and free. And you cannot be whole and free while you're manipulating your own existence to fit into their damage. If this resonates, you know exactly who you need to think about. Maybe you know exactly what conversation needs to happen, or what boundary needs to be set, or what relationship needs to shift. Here's what I need you to do. Don't dismiss this. Don't minimize it. Don't tell yourself it's too hard or that things will get better on their own. They won't, because the person exploiting you doesn't know they're doing it, and people don't change what they don't see. The clarity you have right now, this moment, is your starting point. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "No one can rob you of your freedom," and that's true. No one can rob you, but they can convince you to give it away. And you can do that by staying in a situation that diminishes you. Your worth is not negotiable. It's not something you have to prove. It's not something that exists on a sliding scale based on whether you're useful or compliant or emotionally available. You are worthy right now, just as you are. Not because of what you do, not because of who loves you, not because of your accomplishments or your loyalty or your sacrifice. You are worthy because you exist. And the moment you truly believe that, the moment you stop trying to earn something you already have, everything changes. Before you go, I need you to do 3 things. Comment below. If this video touched something real in you, if you recognized a pattern or a person, I want you to comment. Not for me, but for the person reading the comments who's been feeling alone in this. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to see right now, to know they're not crazy, to know they're not alone. Write it out. Be vulnerable, because that vulnerability is power. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Don't be shy about this. There's someone in your life right now who is in a relationship that's draining them, who's forgotten their own worth, who keeps making excuses for someone else's behavior. Send them this video. Send them a text that says, "I think you need to see this," because sometimes people need permission to value themselves, and sometimes that permission comes from seeing someone else do it first. Because we're going to keep going deeper into the psychology of how you've been conditioned, how you can recognize patterns before they take hold, and how to build a life and relationships rooted in actual reciprocal love instead of obligation. This channel is about reclaiming your power, and I'm committed to giving you the tools to do it. You've come this far. You've watched all the way through. That means something. That means some part of you knows you're worth the effort. So honor that. Take what you learned here and let it change something. Your worth is not a luxury. It's a foundation, and you've already started to